So, my name is Jared Thieler. I'm actually a surgeon by training, but I'm going to do this post. I've never done any posts like this in the past. I don't even have social media of any sort. I don't have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. But over the last couple of weeks, like most of you guys, have lost a lot of sleep because of the current crisis we're in. And this is, I guess, my attempt to shout into the void. I'm just so frustrated right now of all the kind of poor information and misinformation. And maybe it's not even necessarily bad information, it's just skewed information. So the purpose of this video is to hopefully give people perspective on the current crisis and how to put the current infections and death rates and et cetera into perspective of kind of historic perspectives. Briefly, I'm a surgeon by training. I trained with the U.S. military, actually, in the Army. Trained at the University of Virginia from a med school, and I got into medicine like most other people because I wanted to help people. I wanted to heal others, and that's what I did it for. I also have a background in finance. I did my degree in finance, and so I have a pretty good understanding of how the markets work. And my dad was an executive for a large company. My brothers and my sister are all in business, and it's something I've been I watch closely on a day-to-day basis. So I have a pretty good understanding of economics and finance. And then also I've been deployed to Iraq. I've seen death kind of firsthand with that. It's kind of a unique perspective because as we've talked about New York City, for example, and whether they have enough supplies, I know what it means to work in an austere environment with limited medical assets and trying to make life and death decisions with maybe not the most ideal situations. And I've seen that firsthand. But that's just kind of a little bit about me. I've also been training residents for the last 10 years, which means I stay up to date on most of the medical literature, understand how to read studies, evaluate them, understand statistics. I think one of my favorite statistics or sayings is from Mark Twain. He said there's lies, there's damn lies, and then there's statistics. And unfortunately, the statistics often can tell you whatever you want it to say. And I think there's been a lot of statistics that have been skewed one way or another for either political or opinions, and I'm not sure why. Other things about me, I'm overly critical. I probably yell too much at my kids. I'm overly critical of my wife. I don't appreciate her enough. I'm also a perfectionist, and that also makes it hard to live with sometimes, as my wife will tell you. But I say that just to let you know I'm not perfect. I'm an imperfect person just like anybody else. I do have a good heart, though, I think, overall. I've tried to do humanitarian missions. That's one of the reasons I got into medicine, and also went into ENT as a surgeon and craniofacial reconstruction. Is because I want to do cleft palate missions. So I've done 10 or 12 of those throughout the world, and I find that as one of the most rewarding things that I do. Sorry, I've got notes here because there's a lot of things I want to talk about real quick, and I want to try not to forget and try to stay organized. I think overall, like I said, I'm imperfect, but I have relatively good intent. I'm also an expert in the field of immunology, basically microbiology and infections, just because as a surgeon you got to understand how things are transmitted and etc. I also have type 1 diabetics, so immunology became kind of a pet project of mine, understanding how the immune system works, because as a type 1 diabetic it's an autoimmune disorder. So, but also as an expert, you need to view everything that an expert says with skepticism. You view this with skepticism, obviously. And I think we can all understand that while experts have usually good intentions, they also are imperfect and don't always make the right calls. I think we have good examples of that from 2008 when the financial crisis hit. We had a bunch of Wall Street and financial experts that did not see it coming at all, and they got completely blindsided by it, and they were poor experts. In 2016, we had polling experts that told us Hillary Clinton was going to win by a landslide, and I think obviously we can also understand experts were wrong there dramatically. So I say that be cautious of experts. My whole philosophy, though, moving forward of how you decide what to do kind of comes down to the 7th generation principle, and that's where, for example, the Indians would use that as how are the decisions I'm going to make now going to affect the next generation and the generation after that, even up to 7 generations from now. And so that's how I try to frame my points of view. Now, biases. Biases, I think, are important to understand. Whether it comes from an expert, what are their backgrounds and biases? Unfortunately, the media would like to think that they have no biases, but I think that's completely false, and I think it's dishonest. We all have biases, and they shape how we view the world. So I'm going to tell you how my worldviews are shaped and what my biases are, so you can kind of take that and hopefully have a little bit more trust because you understand, well, this is how he views the world, and I see why he views it that way. I vote Republican most of the time, but I didn't vote for Trump or Clinton. I believe one's an covert narcissist and the other one's an overt narcissist, and they're both liars. So I didn't vote for either one. I'll let you figure out which one is which. I believe in free markets is the greatest tool to pull people out of poverty that's ever existed. It has its cancers and its weaknesses, from crony capitalism to lobbying and corporate welfare. But overall, it raises all boats, and it's made all of us much more wealthy and rich. I believe in original liberal thought, and what I mean by that is complete free speech, even bad speech and hateful speech, because free speech is the fundamental of good discourse and a healthy democracy. I believe in climate change. I think it's the worst and most troubling thing that we will face in the next 100 years as a society, way more than COVID-19. I believe in progressive taxes, that we should all pay taxes. Those who have more should pay more because we receive more. Those who earn less should pay less, but we should all pay something, because otherwise you divide us into teams of makers and takers. I don't think that's healthy. I believe in human life being sacred. I'm pro-life, but I also believe abortion should be legal for the health of the mother, rape and incest. So finally, on most social issues, I'm a libertarian. From gay marriage to anything else, it's kind of like you do you, I do me. As long as we're not hurting each other, it's a free country. Okay, so that's how I view the world. Now, where do we go from here? We need to open up. And I believe the lockdown, honestly, for most cases, was a mistake from the very beginning. There's rare exceptions to that, obviously, including high-density populations like New York City probably needed it. But the rest of the country has probably been disturbed by it, and I'll tell you why here in a second. I do not want people to die. As said earlier, I'm a soldier because I want to protect people. I'm a surgeon because I want to heal people. I want people to thrive and live, but unfortunately the current lockdown is doing more harm than good, I think, in the long term. First and foremost, we need to get something out of the way. We're going to lose anywhere from 400,000 to 600,000 people to this virus. Anybody who tells you differently is either doesn't understand how viruses work and how this thing works, or they're lying to you because they want to make you feel safe and protected. But the truth of the matter is we're going to lose 400,000 to 600,000 people. I'll make a whole separate video about how we came to that number. But the basics is the lethality based on what we're seeing from current studies is anywhere from 0.2 to 0.3% of people are going to die from this that contract it, which if you assume 60 to 70% of the population gets it, you're talking about 200 million people infected times 0.2 to 0.3, you come out with 400 to 600,000 deaths. And like I said, I'll do a whole separate video on that. Most of the good news, though, is that most of the antibody studies are showing us that the infection rate is much more broad than we think. Meaning there's a lot more people that have had this infection probably already, and that's good news and bad news. It's bad news because that means there's probably no way of really containing this at this point, but it's also good news in the sense that even though we've only had so many positive tests, when you actually extrapolate those positive tests out to the actual real population that's been infected, it means there's many more people that have been infected than we actually think, which means the overall death rate is much lower than we think. And like I said, I'll do another video on that one. But the likelihood is based on antibody studies out of both New York and California, it's likely anywhere from 5 to 20% or more at this point. Now, there is no eradicating this disease, and I've heard that a lot of times, like, we're just going to go into lockdown and we'll somehow fix this, and we'll eradicate the disease. That's complete misunderstanding of how this works, how epidemiology works, and how microbiology works, because this thing is way too far spread to do that. No amount of testing or tracing is going to fix that. Just because, once again, when you have 5 to 20% of the population that is infected, it's pretty much impossible to do that. On top of that, 80%, based on most studies, anywhere from 50 to 80% of people that have the virus have no symptoms. So they're not even, unless you're testing millions upon millions, 20, 30 million people a day, you're never going to be able to, capture this in essence. And then on top of that, the people that even are symptomatic with fever checks, which I think are, I guess it's something that we do as a society to try to make ourselves feel better, like we're trying to do something. Even fever checks, for the most part, are fairly useless because, once again, you've had the infection already for 4 to 5 days by the time you pop a fever, which means you've already been shedding virus to multiple people. And the thing is because of that, and because of the fact that it has such a high transmission rate, estimated to be 3, meaning for every one person that gets infected, they're going to infect 3 other people. That's a really high transmissibility rate, as opposed to the flu, which is basically a little bit over 1, meaning for every one person that gets the flu, they're going to transmit it to maybe 1 or a little bit more people than that. This one's 3 times higher than the flu, basically. So it's going to transmit fast. Now, the good news also, once again, though, is the worst place that we could have had it first, and the worst place that's going to get hit first, is New York City. And that's for 2 reasons. Number one, New York City has a significantly high density population, more than any other city in the country. Number two, they have a ton of common areas, whether it be subways, elevators, things like that, where everybody shares common areas. And if any place a virus is going to spread fast, it's going to be New York City. And the fortunate news is even New York City was not overwhelmed with their medical system. And thing that people seem to forget too is we actually, despite all the flaws of the medical system here in the US, is also the most robust in the world. And part of that is because we have almost more ICUs than anybody else in the world. We have over 30 per 100,000 ICU beds. Compared to most Western European countries, it's 5 to 10. Germany has the most at 33 in the world, but we're close behind with about 30. So the news is good from that standpoint. We have a robust system that can handle this for the most part. Now, on some perspective, you said, okay, we're going to lose 600,000 people. That sounds like a huge number, and it is. And don't get me wrong, it's going to be a tragedy because we're going to lose a lot of good people. But to put that in perspective, we lose anywhere from around 250,000 people a month here in the U.S. for all causes. We lose 600,000 people a year to heart or to cancer. We lose 650,000 people. We will lose, in theory, more people to heart disease this year than we will to COVID. Okay, and most of the people that are actually going to be dying from COVID are likely the people that already have heart disease and are going to be dying from that heart disease anyway. The other thing is we lose 8,000 people a day to all causes, okay? In other words, we're going to claim as many people from COVID as we will in about 2 months of death. So if you were to say how many people we're going to lose to all causes of death over the next 2 months, it's about 500,000, which is about the same that we're going to lose over the next 12 to 18 months for COVID. Now, one of the things that I've heard a lot of people compare is this is like the 1918 flu, and I think that's incredibly intellectually either stupid, ignorant, or dishonest. Because while they're both viruses, that's like saying the Vietnam War and World War II are the same. They were not. We lost 60,000 people in Vietnam. We lost over 400,000 in World War II. Now, here's just kind of a quick graph, and this is a flu of 1918. Now, right here is death rate, meaning the higher it is here, the more people die by that age. Okay, this is what the rate looked like for the 1918 flu. Okay, meaning one of the big tragedies of the 1918 flu is it was really lethal to a lot of young kids. They were losing thousands upon thousands of kids and babies under the age of 5. Now, it dropped as they got into the teen years, but then, interestingly enough, it had another spike in the 20s to 40s. Okay, so people in their prime, in essence, were dying of this at high rates. And then it dropped back down again in the 50s, and then it started to spike again in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Now, that's what the current flu, that was the 1918 flu, okay? That is not at all what we are dealing with COVID. Additionally, we lost estimated 675,000 people to the 1918 flu, which were like, well, I thought we were going to lose 600,000. Yeah, but the number of people we had back then was over just about 100 million, meaning we are 3 times larger, and we're going to end up losing likely less people than the 1918 flu is. Okay. The other good news about this is, while all tragedy, all life loss is going to be a tragedy, and it is, and not to say that there's not going to be young kids and babies that are going to die from this, there are, but that's going to be an extremely, extremely rare exception. And unfortunately, the news would like to make you think everybody and their kid are going to be dying from this, and that's just not the case. The actual fact is, if you're young and healthy and under the age of 50, you have about a 1 in 4,000 chance of dying from this COVID-19, assuming you contract it. You have about a 1 in 2,500 chance of dying from it if you contract it. But not everybody's actually going to get it. So when you actually look at the overall rate, it's 1 in 4,000 chance that you're going to die. That, just to put it in perspective also, is about the same risk of you dying from driving in the next 5 years. And last I checked, I don't know anybody that doesn't go on vacation or doesn't drive to work because they're afraid of dying from a car accident. But the truth is you do have a small percentage chance. It's about 1 in 4,000 over the next 5 years. So the current COVID, though, its death kind of graph, if you will, if this is high mortality, and so this is your death rate here, and this is your age moving out. Okay, once you get to age 60, okay, along this line it's basically almost nothing. Okay, then you hit age 50 and 60, it starts to rise. You hit age 70 and 80, then that death rate goes up significantly. Okay, That's why estimated 40 to 60% of all deaths are happening in nursing homes, which once again is a tragedy. And my heart goes out to all the folks that have lost kids and loved ones, adults, parents, grandparents. It is. But I think the one silver lining to this that people need to keep in perspective and remember is that this overall is a much more natural process. We're not, as sad as it is, I have parents. I don't want to lose them to this. They're in their 70s. They're definitely at risk. We just lost my mother-in-law last year, and it's sad to lose those that we love. But the fortunate thing is this, with rare exception, is not killing our kids and our toddlers, okay? It's not killing our people in their prime. On the whole, it is as lethal or less lethal likely than the regular flu. And we will likely lose more people to the regular flu under the age of 60 than we will to COVID-19. Now, the last thing I want to say is, why open up now? Like, what's the difference? We're not going to be able to control this. This has already spread too much and too far, and we have too high of a false negative rate for testing. So it's not like we can rely on our testing to do it. And we also know that based on antibody studies, there's way too many people infected already. So how do we go about moving forward? A lot of people have compared this to, this is our World War II generation, challenge. And well, I would say, if this is our World War II generation challenge, then just like in World War II, we need our young and our healthy to go to war. It can't be our old and our sick. Okay, our old and our sick are the ones that are going to die from this. The young and the healthy, you and I, my wife, my kids, they're the ones that can tolerate this infection the best. They will get it, and literally 3,999 times out of 4,000, they're going to live through the next 12 to 18 months without any problem. Just like Iwo Jima and the beaches of Normandy, we need our young and healthy storming these beaches. And what I mean by that, I'm not saying we should go out and get everybody infected all at once. That's stupid also. But we need to go about this similar to what Sweden's done, where we don't congregate in large populations because we don't want this to spread too fast within our population. But at the same time, we need our young and our healthy in the front lines doing two things. Number one, providing goods and services for our elderly and for our sick, whether it's building houses, whether it's farming the land, or whether it's providing health care or delivering packages, whatever it is. But also, as they slowly go through the population, that infection will spread through this population. The best that is going to be able to tolerate it, the young and healthy, and the vast majority of them will do just fine, and they will build antibodies to this. And the more people that we have young and healthy developing antibodies, the closer and the quicker we can come to herd immunity. Now, I realize vaccines are hopefully coming in the next 12 to 18 months, but there's no guarantees that those will come. And in the meantime, if we just let this go through the whole population slowly and don't try to target it towards the young and healthy, we're going to lose a whole lot more people in nursing homes and in hospitals. So I want to advocate to the young and healthy that you need to get back out to work. You need to go about your day. You need to provide the goods and services, and slowly over time, we're going to develop antibodies. Now, other people would say, well, how do we know that antibodies confer immunity? There's no guaranteeing that, and some experts are saying we don't know that for sure. Well, that's a stupid argument, because if antibodies don't confer us immunity, then there's no vaccine anyway. And the vaccine is going to be useless, because vaccines, once again, are developed dependent on us developing antibodies to the vaccine. And if antibodies don't work, it's pointless. And if you've been infected and you still don't have immunity, there's no way the vaccine's going to work. The last thing I want to say is the death rate that we're going to have if we continue on this path of lockdown is going to be way worse. And this is the economist in me and the public health policy person coming out. I've talked to my friend in New York City, and she's been on the front lines, and she's seen, there's a lot of COVID deaths, but quite frankly, a lot of those are people with heart attacks and strokes that were COVID positive, and they're calling them COVID deaths, which I think is insanity. And I don't know why they're doing it, other than we've locked the whole country down and we don't want to look stupid as public officials. And so we're padding those numbers partially, but I don't buy a whole lot of that too much. But what she did tell me is she has friends in the NYPD and in New Jersey that are saying they're seeing spikes in domestic violence up 50%. I have another best friend who's got his law degree from Columbia. He now works in Santa Cruz as an ER doc, and he said, for every one person that I've seen with COVID symptoms that usually are negative, I've seen 3 or 4-fold spike in suicides. And some of those, he said, are repeat offenders, as they call them, but a lot of these, when you talk to them, like, I've lost my job, I've lost my insurance, whole thing is stressing me out, and I just don't know what the point is. And so we're seeing a massive spike in depression and suicides for our kids, which I'm most worried about. All these kids that are not in school and not getting protected by the system and are at home with parents that are increasingly abusive. and who is advocating for them. And then once again, delayed diagnosis for cancer and delayed diagnosis for heart disease. We know we lose 1.2 million people to cancer and heart disease every year. If we just increase that delayed diagnosis by 10%, that's 120,000 people, okay, over the next year. And I have friends also in the ER that saying they're seeing just a massive drop in the rate of heart attacks that are coming in, except they're coming in 2 or 3 days later in a much poorer shape and dying at home or dying in the hospital because they didn't come in on time because they were afraid of COVID. So I think the back end deaths that we're going to get is way worse because of these delayed diagnoses, abuse, suicide, depression, alcoholism, and all these other things. Not even to mention the economic cost to our children, which right now we have almost $30 trillion in debt that we've made. We've increased almost 7 to 8 trillion in the last 2 months, month and a half. And what is that going to do to our children? That is not a good 7th generation decision. Because if we saddle them with all that debt, in addition to really not doing a smart approach, a logical approach to COVID, that is way worse. So that's what I'm advocating. I think we need to get out. We need to have the young and healthy get back to work, provide the goods and services that they need. I've been working through this whole time at the hospital, and I will continue to work this whole time at the hospital. And I want everybody that I know that's young and healthy to get this over the next few months so that we can all get immunity to it. And then we can start protecting our kapunas, our grandmas, our grandpas, our parents, that they can't handle the infection. And we need to be like the soldiers on Iwo Jima and Normandy, and we need to go to the front lines, and we need to become the ones that are going to shield them. And we shield them by protecting them with the things that they need, but then also becoming infected with this over time and then developing the antibodies so that we can get herd immunity sooner rather than later. And that's all I got. We're going to do some other videos on why it's probably healthier to stay outside than inside, and also some on kind of risk ratio analysis and things like that. And once again, my name is Jared Thieler, and I hope we can open up soon and kind of get back to some type of normalcy sooner rather than later and really provide a world that we want our kids to inherit.